Are you hungry? Are you starving? You come to the right place, because this episode will become something of a food episode before it's done. Bear with me. Fruit of the Loom? Budget cuts. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Director's Garage. I am your host and resident idiot, Michael. And today, guys, you're going to be stuffed by the end of this super-sized review, because we're about to embark on a gourmet audiophile meal of the Raal 1995 Immanis and its baby brother, the Magna. Ribbon driver headphones, folks. I think you're going to be in a food coma by the end of this, because throughout this culinary infused review, I'm going to revisit a phrase so often, you may want to make it a drinking game. Let them eat. Today's episode has had more hype going into it than any episode I can remember. I've received all of your notes and emails. I know that this is the one you've been waiting for. So I'm going to make you wait for it a minute longer while I tell you about some awesome Director's Garage merch. Yeah, guys, the Director's Garage store is live, and you can pick up shirts like the one I'm wearing right now. These are tasteful, classy designs you can wear at work or play. I love this stuff, and I wear it everywhere. Just ask Mrs. Director. Okay, head over to directorsgarage.com and check out this killer collection. All right, back to the show. Let's get this party started with the Ergos. And guys, these two are about as perfect as you can get. They're gorgeous, and they're comfortable. I wore these for hours on end, both of them with no discomfort, but not at the same time. They're not quite a meze. The meze is still the comfort king, but there's nothing uncomfortable about the Immanis or the Magna. The Immanis is a little bit on the heavier side. The Magna is a bit lighter, but the Magna is also slightly smaller by about 20% or so, as I pointed out before. But with my Dumbo ears, more space is always appreciated. And both of these headphones feel premium everywhere you touch them. The wood is perfection. The grills, they're like jewelry. I guess I could make the argument that they're maybe too ornate for some folks, but I just love this look, guys. I love it. They look expensive. The hardware is tight and has a premium feel. You feel like you're getting a $10,000 product, as you should. And that's no small feat. Even look at this headband. The Immanis, this version of the Immanis has this diamond stitch pattern. You'd see this on a high-end sports car, guys, not headphones, but Raal did it. It's clear that the Raal 1995 team were well aware that this headphone was going to cost a lot of money, and they want the owners to feel like no expense was spared. And I don't see anything on these headphones that looks or feels like a compromise. The leather is soft and forgiving. If I were going to improve these in any way, the only thing I could think of was maybe changing out this headband for carbon fiber like the Meze uses, but that would mean re-engineering this nifty yoke system, which adds to the beauty of the headphone. But otherwise, everything about this headphone, it just screams premium.
It's about power. Director's Garage.
So I started listening for this review the way I do most of my reviews. I'm on like a low to mid volume, low gain, and I had a really nice start to this thing. I had a nice stage. I had a nice dimensionality going on, better bass than I ever remembered. So far, so good. And then I started changing settings, and I did something I usually try to avoid on most headphones. I pushed high gain. Now gain adds grain, but I never heard the grain on the Immanis or the Magna. It was just, holy shit, these things went from polite, well-sorted headphones to beasts. You know how you're slicing a tomato and it's going pretty well, and then you grab like a ginsu and it's like, whoa, mama, I'm going like crazy. What else can I cut while I got this thing in my hand? Well, I know it's a terrible analogy, but the Magna started dancing and driving and thumping and filled my head with sound I don't know that I've heard from another headphone. And then I switched to the Immanis and things sharpen up even more. The image went from politely sorted to pinpoint locations. So again, let them eat. More power, the greater reward. push these things and they will do tricks that will leave your chin on the ground. It's awe-inspiring stuff.
Soundstage appears before my ears.
Now for stage, I know this is going to sound bizarre, and I doubt that many people are going to agree with me, but I always tell you what I hear in the reviews, not what other people hear. And to me, the stage is open, but I don't hear it extending like crazy laterally away from my head. Like say the STAX SRX 9000 or the Susvara or even the Abyss for that matter. What I hear in the Immanis, and I think it's brilliant, is it places the instruments not just in a specific image, but it's like a 3D space. Like, I swear if there's a violin, I can not just hear the violin in a location, but I can hear around that instrument, and I can hear what's behind that instrument. So if, say, there's a bongo, and I know that's a bizarre instrument to pair with a violin, but I can hear the stringed instrument in front of the bongo, even though they're coming from the same location. It's a very unique effect, and I attribute this to the Immanis and its 3 drivers. I'm going to focus on the Immanis here because the Magna doesn't do this trick as well as the Immanis, so I'm going to focus here because I think there's an interaction happening with the 3 drivers that throws complementary waves out to certain areas of the headphone, and it gives you this unique positioning effect and a sense of depth I haven't heard from other headphones. Now, Danny from Raal told me that the secret sauce of this is that each ribbon is tuned and tensioned differently. So there's never an additive effect at any given frequency. Each ribbon is complementary to each other. This gives instruments a rich texture and dimensionality. In the traditional sense of Soundstage, I would say that these were above average wide. But the stage overall is a huge win because of this dimensional effect. Again, the more power you feed the headphone, the more impressive the Soundstage became. I am so ready for lunch.
It's dynamic, yeah, it's dynamic.
Dynamics, that quiet to loud thing. And this is a bit of a mixed bag here. To me, the ribbon gives more impact than an E-stat, but not as much punch as a planar or a dynamic driver. But these things can thrill me when something hits really low in the sub. You get that impact. These things dig insanely deep, way deeper than I expected. The sub-bass response on the Immanis and the Magna is close to the best I've experienced. And with optimal power, keyword being optimal, I even get a little bit of slam. But it's not nearly as physical as a headphone like the Abyss. And one of the things I love to do on the Abyss is you break the seal, you get this massive concussive effect, and the Immanis won't give you any of that. And certainly not when you break the seal. Still, what you're getting is this near electrostatic speed, but better dynamic punch along with a deep extension that leaves the STAX boys begging like hungry dogs for table scraps. In my experience, the ribbons sort of bridge the gap between the weak part of the E-stats and the best parts of the planar magnetic headphones. These things are faster than planars. They sound snappier and they go from quiet to loud faster, but it's a little shy of the impact that I love from a good planar. Now, as long as we're here, let's talk about some detail.
Finger picking and tambourine hitting. The devil is in the detail.
I think you're going to need to follow me a bit because this may be a little more confusing of a category, but I don't think that these Raal headphones are the most detailed headphones I've heard. I think that the E-stats out-detail the ribbons. But this headphone gets you very near the STAX X9000 experience, but it doesn't rip the music apart into components. It stays musical. So while the quantity of the detail isn't as granular as the X9000, the overall quality of the detail is among the best I've heard. Like HE1 territory good. Now, the X9000 and the 009S have the most detail of a consumer headphone I've heard, and the X9000 fixes some of the sins of the 009S, which is pure analysis and detail and less music. But I think with the ribbons, you get a better balance between that hyper-detailed, granular approach and flowing musicality. I'd also note that you get that detail in beautifully intimate recordings, as well as complex albums with a lot of instrumentation going on at once. And the Magna is just as fast as the Immanis. I'm a huge Fratelli fan, and Here We Stand is a busy album. There's a lot of stuff going on. And the sound gets positively massive at places, and neither the Immanis nor the Magna ever had a problem of keeping all that detail separated. They never globbed up, even in the most thick sections of songs that have distortion and compression on them. The Immanis and the Magna, they produce a romantic, warm sound that happens to still out-detail even the most uber expensive headphones out there, save a few E-stats. All right, we're going to talk about detail's evil stepsister. I'm talking about speed.
Get out!
That's so stupid. I've alluded to this already, but the ribbon to my ears is a tick slower than the E-stats, or at least the best E-stats out there. But the ribbons are still wicked fast and delightfully responsive. You get near electrostatic speed, but you get that speed with weight and heft and dimensionality. Whereas the X9000, it pushes straight detail without that weight behind it. I much prefer the ribbon to the E-stat. These things generate speed, but into the lowest frequencies where the E-stats just give up. And that translates to emotion. I'm going to give you an example here. Simon & Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water. The Only Living Boy in New York is a deeply emotional experience on the Immanis. The melodic bass line just drives that song, and it pulls you into this emotional feast.
Hey!
More food references. I don't connect to that song on the X9000 the way I do on the Immanis or the Susvara. One other note on speed. Oftentimes when you increase voltage, you seem to lose some of that speed. The headphone feels less agile, and the ability to crush out detail seems to diminish. The ribbons, these things sound unaffected by current. It's like if you're pushing a loud volume, they simply react. At least that's what I'm hearing. It's brilliant stuff. We got to talk about realism with this headphone. The ability to produce an instrument in a room, and I think the Immanis outperforms even the Susvara and the STAX in realism. Again, I think it's that dimensionality that presents itself in the stage and the imaging, the frequency responses. I just feel like the instrument is right there in your head. This is a great headphone to close your eyes and lose yourself in music. I can't remember a more pure audiophile experience. Among all the accolades I've been heaping on this headphone, both it and the Magna, I think realism is the greatest compliment. And you don't just get the instrument, you get the sense of the room where the recording was made. London Calling was one of my favorite albums on the Immanis. You get the sense that this album wasn't recorded in this massive sound studio. I don't know another headphone that takes you into a room like the Immanis. Now the Magna, it is just a tick below the Immanis on realism. The Magna doesn't deliver the stage and the image that the Immanis does, but it does deliver the frequency response and the speed. I just don't get the sense that I could walk around the instruments the way I can on the Immanis.
I'm lost without sound structure. Ain't no basses, no trebles or mids.
Now, before I get into the next section, I'm going to simply state that the Raal 1995 headphones are tuned to my exact preference. And that turns a snack of a headphone into a 7-course meal. Now, all of this will be amplified, pardon the pun, or don't pardon it, what do I care, as I begin to break down the sound. And both of these headphones do share the same sound structure. I'm talking about bass and mids and treble, and yeah, I'm gonna do them in that order today. Why are you even still watching? Okay, we're starting with the bass, because the bass Well, the lack of bass presence was a note that I made when I was auditioning the Immanis at Can Jam. I felt it didn't have enough oomph down low into those lowest frequencies, and these lacked the physicality of some of my favorite headphones, like this one. Well, I think horsepower has a lot of effect on this headphone. This headphone likes to drink. It's a thirst trap of a headphone, and I think the Immanis responds quite favorably to a lot of power. The cleaner, the better. This was a different headphone when I plugged it into the Ray Samuels B21 Raider. The bass response was greater than when I recalled hearing it on the Viva tube amps at Can Jam. Then you engage the high gain, and drums boom and crack. You feel the resonance, zero bloat, tight, responsive bass that delivers. And I note again, higher power activates that bass better than the lower power settings. High gain, high gain, high gain. The more you feed these things, the more responsive this headphone gets, and the bigger the bass presence and authority. And there's no detectable sacrifice of bass quality. The bass retains its detail even at the higher power settings, even into the sub. I never felt like I was getting anywhere close to distortion on the Immanis, no matter how much I fed this headphone. It just kept giving and giving. On a tube you get a little bit of grit, but it doesn't sound like distortion, just kind of a little rougher edge that enhances the experience. It's just amazing bass. Oh, we got to talk about the mids. They're pure, they're crisp, not overly forward. There isn't that thin upper mid-range that you can sometimes hear on the Susvara. But I did hear one instance where I think a violin got a little bit peaky through the mids, but I was listening kind of loud, so I kind of asterisked that, but I kept it in the back of my mind. We'll talk about it later, but the mids stay solid throughout the frequency range, and then you get the vocals. Female vocals, oh, the female vocals on this headphone, just gorgeous. I fed these Nora Jones, and for the hell of it, I dropped down to low gain, and her vocal on Don't Know Why, it's just delicate. She's close mic'd on this track, and then you switch back to the high gain, and she gets this presence and dimension. It completely won me over. It's goosebumps all over. They're rich, they're clean, just gorgeous. They served up like a loudspeaker worthy experience, but again, only when you step up the power. And that, of course, leaves treble. Now, if there's a weakness or sort of a weakness in the Immanis and the Magna, I would say that the treble doesn't wow me in the way that the mids and the bass impress. And maybe there's kind of a compliment there, because sometimes headphones that wow me in the treble generally get a lot of other things wrong. And maybe there's a point to be made. I don't have a knock on the treble on these. It's crisp, it's clean, it's detailed, it's spacious, it's not veiled or anything. But the treble just doesn't stand out to me and capture my imagination the way that the mids and the bass capture my attention. Certainly there's no sibilance or brightness. It's a pure top end, and you get that 3D effect just as you do with the rest of the frequency range. It's stunning, if not in a standout way. The treble complements the rest of the frequency range without dominating or calling attention to itself. Pretty high compliment, actually. The biggest tell that these two headphones impressed me is that the ribbon drivers had me scouring my music collection for my very best tracks. And I'd want to audition one song and I'd wind up staying for 3 or 4. They're just that good. You get lost in your music, which is exactly when I know I'm listening to something special. When the music keeps coming and I don't want to interrupt the festivities to seek out some new artist, yeah, I'm golden, guys. The Raal 1995 Immanis is one of the most rewarding headphones I've ever auditioned, full stop. BYBS. Bring your best sources. One night, I know you guys thought that was going somewhere else entirely, but one night I started the evening off with Simon & Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water. It's a 192K encoded 24-bit transfer, and it sounded terrible. There was a ton of noise in the playback. It was so bad, I started swapping amps and gain setups just to try and clear the muck and figure out what was going on. Well, it turns out it was the encoding. When I played back Steely Dan's Asia, it was dead quiet. Bowie was completely clean, and then I went back to S&G, and that noise was baked into the S&G master, and it laid it out to bear, every last crappy bit of it. Now, it certainly says something about the resolving power of a headphone like this one. Bridge never sounded so awful. The headphone revealed terrible flaws in the mastering, or maybe it was the transfer, but it turns out it was only the title track, thankfully, that had all that noise. The rest of the album sounded better, though in truth, Bridge has never been the cleanest recording. Going back to my 8-track tape days, it certainly was jarring to hear, and I'm glad it wasn't the headphone or one of my amps. Cecilia was brilliant, by the way. That big, huge bass drum that they hit, it just resonates into the sub beautifully. I noted subtle differences between the purchased FLAC and the title FLAC version. The title version had less dynamic range and it sounded less airy. So with all that power, you also get resolving power to tell you how good or bad your streaming service or HD track masters really are. We're going to talk classical today. I don't talk about it that much, but with the X9000 Stage, I thought that comparing it to the Immanis would be a natural stress test. I chose a recent release of Johann Sebastian Bach's Concerto for Oboe featuring Itzhak Perlman, a great violinist. And while the X9000 seemed to give me more detail, well, a lot more detail actually, the Immanis was more laid back in its approach and it did a better job of sort of floating the violin in a space. The X9000 surprised me by being the more efficient headphone. I found myself having to compensate down the volume by several clicks to get a sound match. I thought these two headphones would be quite similar, and I was surprised to note how different the headphones actually sounded. It was Wendy's versus McDonald's. I can taste the fries right now. The X9000 was decidedly more mid-forward. I thought the bass response of the Immanis came across more natural and way more present, of course, in comparison. I think the X9000 has a speed advantage and definitely a bit of a wider stage, but the more I listened to the Immanis, I felt this greater sense of depth on this headphone. And again, it's maybe the most realistic headphone I've auditioned. A violin sounded more authentic to my ears, which made me wonder how the Immanis would fare against my Susvara. So switching to the Susvara, this was a fascinating comparison. The first thing I noted on the Susvara was that the bass on the orchestra was better filled. Now, I know the Immanis has fantastic bass response and extension, so I started going back and forth between them, and what I noted was that on the Immanis, the violin sounded more present and it spiked with greater authority. So I was compensating by turning the volume down to match the Susvara levels, but the Susvara tucked the violin more into the mix and I pushed the volume a little bit more, and I think that's why I perceived the Susvara as giving me a more robust bass presence. Very interesting to compare these two power-hungry headphones. Now, what the Susvara can't match is that 3D stage that you get on the Immanis, and you get a better sense of the hall on the Immanis too. Both were exceptional in their own ways, but push to pick a winner, I'm going to buck a trend here, and I'm going to say the Susvara, because the Immanis got a little bit peaky on the upper end when the violin swelled. But it made me wonder about that bass, so I went in a radical direction. Now, I'm the first to admit that Charli XCX at times sounds like noise to me. I guess I'm officially old, folks. I'm no longer Brat. But the heavy synth-infused songs were a great point of comparison between the Susvara and the Immanis, and interestingly, my experience with the classical track was completely flipped. The Immanis brought a sub to the synths that the Susvara couldn't muster. I felt the low bass pads on the Immanis, and I didn't feel them on the Susvara. Plus, the Immanis gave me this shock and awe experience in the stage when it came to all of those different synth loops hitting around your head. It's crazy. The Susvara kind of played it straight. The Immanis was hitting me at all these unusual angles. So for techno pop driving synth, a genre I rarely visit, the Immanis most impressed me. You know how I joked on that ESTAT episode about how hard rock would not be the genre I would turn to an ESTAT to listen to? Well, I thought I'd feel the same way about the Ribbon, and nope, these things exceeded my expectations on Zeppelin. I called up Page & Plant's least metal album, LZ3, which is a mix of acoustic and harder stuff like Celebration Day and Immigrant Song. I was on the ride through the entire thing. It just kept giving. Solid bottom end, Bonzo's drums boomed away. On the tube, these things produced. Fleetwood Mac. Best Fleetwood Mac headphone ever. The instrumentation, the bass, those phenomenal 2 albums, the self-titled and the Rumors. Every track was a complete thrill and a speaker-like experience. John McVie's bass digs so deep into the sub on a song like Rhiannon, and even the quieter tracks like Warm Ways, Gold Dust Woman, especially on that KSE-100. Complete synergy. Now, I thought the KSE would be the hard rocker amp. No, it does the quieter stuff wonderfully. It's just great. The harmonies are so tight, and this headphone has such a good image. Though they blend those voices together incredibly well, you still get individual separation between the singers. It's brilliant. Cymbals. Listen to Dreams. The splash on the cymbal is heaven. Thunderous toms mix kit pops and thumps and rattles you to the core, but it's still all a part of the mix. These do not separate in that analytical way. These keep you in touch with the music. You feel it. Conclusion. Looking back, my biggest fear of Ribbons was that they sort of gave me a specific sound, kind of like a party trick. At least that was my impression the first time I heard a Raal headphone, specifically the SR1A. I thought, this is really clever, really cool, spatially rewarding, and I'm going to be over this sound in a few days. It was a hard pass for me. Well, with this version, with these versions really, I want to talk about the Immanis specifically. The Immanis has flat out won me over. You have to feed it. If there's a takeaway from this review, it's let this headphone eat. It will give you back what you put into it. I prefer this headphone when it's turned up and on high power, low impedance. I think this is my current favorite headphone, and I was not expecting to say that. I did a lot of swapping for this review, and the only headphone that really challenged what I heard was this OG Susvara, and that's one hell of a testament to this somewhat old headphone now. It just brought together all the parts of the music with maybe a bit more consistency at the expense of sub-bass extension and maybe a little bit of detail. But I will say this full stop. I would happily trade my X9000, my Abyss 1266TC, LCD4 ZMF Caldera, or any combination of them for this Immanis. I feel that strongly about this headphone. At the same time, I wouldn't recommend running out and buying this headphone today because this performance comes with a major caveat. I don't believe this headphone will thrill you on lower powered amps, because the beginning of my journey with the Immanis and the Magna for that matter were at lower power settings, and everything was nice, beautiful, pretty. but not outstanding in any way. I didn't get excited. When I started feeding them power, high gain, high power on my very highest powered amps, up to and including a 100 watt speaker amp, that's when these ribbons came alive. So in my opinion, you're faced with a challenge or a dilemma with this headphone. Do you lay out the hefty cost and live with them on decent gear where other headphones will, in my opinion, sound more impressive? Or are you prepared to double down on this headphone investment and give these things enough power to send them into another dimension? I'd make the argument that if your current rig is good, say Burson level or Hollow May or GSX Ferrum, I think you're going to be better off buying a more efficient headphone like the Caldera, because you're not going to get the performance you're paying for with this ribbon headphone. So in this way, the Immanis, and the Magna for that matter, are a lot like the Susvara. Be prepared to amp chase if you're going to dive in. It took me years, guys, years to go back. Just look at the long list of amps I bought and sold while trying to find a good amp combo for this Susvara. And I'd expect if you're starting out, you're in for a long ride with these Raals before you find something that'll perform for you. If you have the horsepower, though, if you have absolute top-tier God power and an abundance of it, feed these things and let them eat. And when you do, I don't recall a better listening experience. They're that good. Magna or Immanis. Magna or Immanis. This is actually a fairly easy call for me, guys. The Magna is a fantastic headphone. It gives you everything the Immanis does, but without that 3D soundstage. It digs just as deep. It needs the same power to get them into that thin air of elite sound. It's just as fast. It has the same image and dynamics. But if I'm paying $6,000, I want the stage and the extra $4,000 is worth it to upgrade to the Immanis, in my opinion. That said, though I preferred the Immanis, the Magna itself is still probably in the top 5 or 6 headphones of any headphone I've heard. Again, with that asterisk of when amped correctly. Weaknesses. Well, 2 things stand out for me, and the first is price, because neither of these 2 headphones are cheap. $6,000 and $10,000. These are coronary inducing prices for any headphone, like Red Fox. I'm coming, Elizabeth. Anyone? Well, sorry. And then there's the amplification issue. The cost of the headphone is just the beginning of the expense to get these headphones to perform at a level of their cost. On a good solid $3,000 to $5,000 amp, this headphone probably won't impress you, and I believe a lot of other headphones will sound better. I mentioned the Caldera, the HE1000, Audeze. You're going to enjoy these cheaper headphones on the lesser gear. I tend to zero in on the Caldera because it gives great speed, exceptional bass extension, great image, good dynamics, easy to drive, and they won't break the bank. Well, they may stress the bank, but they won't break the bank. To get the ribbons to perform like a Caldera, and way, way beyond them when you finally amp them properly, you're looking to add at least another $10,000 and upwards to drive these things. Oh, and you better have a great DAC too, because these headphones are revealing as hell. They expose every single weakness in your chain. That said, and what a long-ass wrap-up to a long-ass episode. My God, cut it short, buddy. But I have a lot to say about these. This is perhaps the greatest headphone experience I've ever had in the studio with the Immanis, and to a slightly lesser degree, the Magna. But with both of these headphones, you're buying supremely constructed, beautiful, well-appointed, comfortable headphones that outperform anything on the consumer market provided you amp the hell out of them. Man, what a couple of weeks we've had around the garage. And I have to send my most sincere gratitude to Danny McKinney from Raal for giving me the opportunity and the pleasure of spending time with these magnificent creations. Other than my Susvara, I can't think of another headphone that gives these things a run for their money. The Susvara has one weakness, which is the upper mids. I talk about it often, which can sound a little thin at times, an area where these ribbons, well, they don't seem to have any issue at all. If there's a weakness sonically, Itzhak Perlman's violin maybe got a little peaky. But that's about it, guys. I'd point out also that the Susvara and the Raal headphones are both equally challenging to amplify, and the Susvara doesn't react as well to tubes compared to these ribbons. But these Raals, amped correctly, they're as close to sonic perfection as I've heard, and if and when I get back to gainful employment, I'm hoping to be buying a pair. Now, sadly, I have to drive these back to their owner now.
Like, and subscribe.
Thanks for stopping by the garage today. We have more on the way. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. You can head over to our Patreon site, connect with other garage heads, and join in our offline Zoom sessions. I'm getting loopy, folks. They're a ton of fun, and you're looking at those supporters' names right now. They help make all of this happen. Give this episode a thumbs up if you enjoyed this insanely deep dive into the world of Raal, or you can do the other thing if you'd rather have nap time, or maybe you had it during this episode. I can't say I blame you either way, and I will see you before you know it.
Die.